Today, we are here with Rosenberg. Sir, how are you?
Oh, I'm good, but don't you dare call me sir. I'm great. How are you, Scott?
I'm doing very well. I've had a wonderful little Canadian small town experience today, and so moved some plants, and other than that, just regular day. Today, I want to start on the basics, and we'll sort of build it up from there. I think that's a good start
Okay.
because I think it can be a good contribution to the series. When you're looking at codependency from personal experience and from a professional, educated opinion, uh, what would you describe the experience subjectively without that knowledge? How would you frame it with an expert analysis?
Well, that's a huge question, and I'll try to make a huge sprawling question into something um, that something that is concise enough. Everything that I know about codependency, or what I call self-love deficit disorder, comes from my own history of falling in love with narcissists, not knowing that in the beginning. And then once fully enveloped in a relationship, experiencing the inherent harm that happens with people who have a personality disorder, like someone with narcissistic personality disorder, um, and another caretaking person. And it was after my second marriage and then divorce, I was reeling from the pain of yet another dysfunctional marriage, and I could not find a therapist that could explain why this happened. Why did I fall in love with someone who was so beautiful and exquisitely interesting in the beginning and turned out to be so harmful? And it was through my own personal process that I came up with this idea that codependents unconsciously are attracted to what is familiar. And codependents are caretakers. They're altruistic, they're patient, they're selfless. They are attracted to unconsciously someone who is the opposite, who is selfish, self-centered, grandiose, and entitled. And it was within this very painful, tumultuous period of my life, I came up with this metaphor that seemed to change my life, and apparently a lot of people globally, people that have read my book and been exposed to my ideas, and that is the codependent and the codependent narcissist relationship is like a dancing couple. The codependent needs to effortlessly allow themselves to move in any direction that the narcissist wants. So, and the narcissist leads in any direction that they want. So, like any dancing couple, especially a couple who are dancing to the tango, the leader needs the follower. And that idea of opposite but matched personality types led me to understand that because of the trauma that codependents experience in childhood during their attachment phase, which is growing up with their parents, almost every codependent has a narcissist as a parent, and that impact on their development created trauma that would later manifest into adult codependency. So the shortest possible answer to your question is I came to understand codependency, and here's my definition. It is a person who is attracted to a selfish, self-centered, entitled narcissist who always gives the love, respect, care, protection, and trust, wants it to be reciprocated, wants it to be mutual, and they can't, and it doesn't happen, and they stay. And the short version is it's a person who gives the love, respect, caring, trust, and protection, wants it to be mutual. It's not, and they stay in a relationship. So I created a very, very simple explanation that would later make a lot of sense to people through the opposite dance concept, the leader and the follower, but also because it happens unconsciously. We are repeating what we learned as a child. If because of our attachment trauma, we learn to be invisible. learned to be a trophy child. We learned to be moldable. That is how we got whatever love that was available from the narcissist. And that attachment trauma is relegated to a part of our brain that is offline. It's disassociated. So and I'm going to wrap up this definition because I didn't want it to be that long. So it's a problem with the disparity of giving and taking love, respect, trust, LRCT, love, respect, caring, trust, and protection, staying in that relationship, and following this inner compulsion, this inner feel of familiarity and safety with a person who is harmful to you. So that is what I learned. That was what codependency was from my personal life. And then I would expand it through developing more details and explanations with the concepts and the theory to eventually explain to people exactly what codependency is. But unfortunately, I can't give you a simple answer on that. That's the best I got for the simple answer.
And so people who are in this toxic dance looking for love and care and trust and safety and so on. I mean, there's a sense in which over time the person is involved in their own process of self-erasure. So
What was the word?
erasure.
Erasure. Yeah, your Canadian accent, eh? Now you can be making fun of me too. It all depends on where this video is going to be. Is the one that's actually should be
That's right.
embarrassed. But please go ahead.
And so that metaphor of the dance, I'm imagining someone over a period of time, the period of time depending on the person, uh, essentially turning into some type of wraith or ghost, disappearing over time as they're catering more and more to
Right.
a self-absorbed person, and not in the normal sense of self-absorption as everyone is to some degree, but pathologically so.
Right. So what you're saying, you imagine that someone would progressively become dissociative. In other words, disassociate from their emotions and using your words, be a ghost. So one of the things that I've done in my Human Magnet Center books, and especially my most recent one, The Codependency Revolution, Fixing what always is broken, is that I explain the very simple definition of codependency. Because and by the way, I'm going to get your answer in a second, I promise. The problem with the world's understanding of codependency, it takes a long time to explain it, and it's different depending on who explains it. So it's giving all the love, respect, caring, trust, and protection, wanting to be mutual, it's not, and staying in a relationship. And then what I learned, again, through my personal life and then through my clinical practice, is that personality type is independent. So you can have the salt of the earth, dissociative type of person who will be codependent. You can have the angry, controlling person. I call one the passive codependent, and I call the other one the active codependent that is arguing, trying to control the narcissist, taking it personally. And I have 8 other codependency personality types. And the reason this is such essential information is because a lot of codependents are gaslit. They're manipulated by the narcissist to believe that there's something wrong with them, and and if someone is an active codependent like I was, who argues and tries to get the narcissist to do something, and they say, "Quit controlling me," and you end up believing it, well, that's gaslighting. So I wanted people to know that there are different types of codependence, different personality profiles, so that you can identify with the disorder and not get lost in the personality type. Oh, I should add, also independent from the codependency definition are things like honesty, anger, drug and alcohol use, marital infidelity or relationship infidelity. So I wanted to make it a very kind of like you're going to a medical doctor, and they want to see if you have a certain medical problem, you have to have the right symptoms in order to be diagnosed and then prescribe medicine. Well, I wanted to create something like that for codependency, a simple definition, and with an understanding of the different variations of what it might look like.
I mean, these people are attracted to narcissists in this way. Um, how bad can it get?
It can get, well, I'm assuming this is a rated G interview, so it can get bleeping terrible. Um, Pathological narcissists, as I explained in my books, is someone with one of the three personality disorders, either narcissistic, borderline, or antisocial, or what people call sociopaths, personality disorders. They're all different personality disorders, but they all share a central narcissistic core. And all narcissists will have an emotional reaction, a narcissistic injury, rage, contempt, anger, when someone gives them feedback, corrects them, calls them out. And so if a codependent is in a relationship and they try to stand up for themselves, there always will be a reaction, a strong reaction that is designed by the narcissist to put the codependent down and get them to stop wanting to take care of themselves and to see the narcissist as more worthy as them. And that can be anywhere from physical abuse to emotional abuse. It can be anything from gaslighting, triangulating other people, poisoning the minds of their children. There are so many variations of harm that the narcissist can do.
Is this a conscious process or more of a reactive process
From whom?
of the narcissist themselves?
So the essential similarity between all personality disorders is that the problem is so essential to the person's overall personality, they don't experience it as a problem. They don't have the discomfort or what someone would say cognitive dissonance. Um, it doesn't feel like, hey, something's wrong with me, I should get help. They can't see that there's something wrong with them. Therefore, they blame the other person. So that is why there is a very, very low percentage of people with these disorders who go and reach out for help because they tend to not see themselves as the problem and blame others. And so that makes them chronically and historically harmful. But the only person that they can harm are the ones that are going to stay in relationships with them. And then we have the human magnet syndrome. The codependent and the narcissist have this attraction of the dance. It fits, it's unconscious, and it feels to both of them that it's love. And the codependent, of course, is the one that's hurt most and can't escape, because not just because of what the narcissist is doing or not doing, they are terrified of loneliness or pathological loneliness. So that the pain and suffering is horrible. And it really has to do with the type of the degree of the codependency or the self-love deficit disorder, which is the name that I created for it, and the type of narcissism, because you can be a sociopath, and then there are levels of sadistic traits. You can have narcissistic personality disorder, and there are levels of grandiosity and entitlement. So no matter what it is, it's incredibly painful and horribly emotionally transfiguring. It's traumatic.
What about practical tools? I mean, things that people can develop are boundaries. You know, in session, how do you slowly uh, give people some realizations or help them come to realizations rather, uh, that boundaries are a possibility, A, and B, some things they can take home and potentially work on in some mild ways to be better at developing boundaries themselves.
Yeah. Well, first, let me clarify something. The problem is not about boundaries. You can teach an SLD, someone with self-love deficient, a codependent, boundaries all day. And they can be a psychotherapist like me, a recovering codependent. And no matter how brilliant you are in the discussion of boundaries and the teaching of it, the deeper subterranean elements of codependency, the parts that are unconscious, the parts that are guided from the part of ourselves that are disassociated, those are in charge. The codependent, to understand codependency, you have to understand, if you look at a pyramid, I call it the codependency pyramid or my self-love deficit disorder pyramid. At the bottom is the attachment trauma we talked about. From that is core shame, is a fundamental belief, a fundamental belief that you are inherently unloved, you are inherently not lovable or broken. From core shame is pathological loneliness, is this bone aching, pervasive pain of feeling alone in the world, so much so it's painful. And then from there is this addictive compulsion to be in a relationship or the addiction. So if we're going to solve codependency, we have to solve it not at the very top of the pyramid, which is the symptoms. That's what all the books are about. We have to go all the way to the bottom and get to the attachment trauma, which is not accessible through talk therapy. So what I've done is I've created a treatment program, a 10-stage treatment program called the Self-Love Recovery Treatment Program that gets to the trauma, the core shame, the loneliness, the SLDD addiction, and all of the traits and characteristics. And that takes anywhere from like 8 months to about a year and a half, because we are not just teaching someone, here are boundaries, read this book on boundaries. It's to get to that part of them that no matter what is going to sabotage their mental health, their children's safety, because of something that they can't really feel or know because it's unconscious. So in my counseling sessions, with people who are in the treatment program, we talk about boundaries, and that's a really important subject, but that comes at a time when they're ready and capable of understanding what they can do and knowing and being aware of the countervailing forces of what happens. To set a boundary with a personality disordered partner, there's going to be a storm. And there's a lot more to that, but I'll leave it at that because I know you got more questions.
When you're in session with an individual who is stuck in these relationship patterns and in relationship, how do you engage in that treatment program even when they're still in it? You know?
So, great question. I'll never forget the time a friend of mine who was an attorney who owned several different offices, and he comes up to me, and this is like 14 years ago. He goes, "Ross, Google bankruptcy attorneys Chicago," and I did, and there was his practice. I go, "Wow, how did you do that?" He goes, "Well, this Google just bought YouTube. I don't know if you've heard about YouTube." I go, "I think I have," and it was new. I'm dating myself. He says, "If you do YouTube videos, you are out on the internet and you get up really high in SEO." Well, so that's before I wrote a book. It was about the time I was traveling around the United States giving my training, Codependents and Narcissists, Understanding the Attraction, to other therapists. I started posting things on YouTube. Long story short, my YouTube channel now has been viewed 30 million times and has 300,000 subscribers. I have a podcast called the Self-Love Recovery Podcast that is at top 2% globally ranked. So what people find my stuff through YouTube and the podcast or different social media where I have a presence. And when they like find a video or find an article, then they come to my website because they hear me talking about codependency in a way that no one has done before. No one. I not only explain it, I also explain it in a way that makes sense and explain it so the person could understand why they spent their whole life trying to get better and they couldn't. And then if people can afford my rates, then I encourage them to work with me in my treatment program. And if they can't, well, I have other educational and support products and services to help them. But it all starts with someone just Googling codependency or narcissism and finding me. And I thank my friend Dave all those years back and turning me on to YouTube, because I don't know what would have happened if I never found YouTube.
Do you think codependency, say, middle of last century to now, if you put a line of best fit, ignoring all the bumps that might show up
Mhm.
in any particular study or meta-analysis, has been increasing over time, decreasing over time, or has been more or less stable among
Um,
North American populations?
um, a lot of people say narcissism is the worst it's ever been. Other people say, and this actually annoys me. I try not to act annoyed or say I'm annoyed, where they'll say, well, everyone's a narcissist, and that doesn't mean anything. And then I explain in a book that I wrote, I created a continuum that specifies specifically what is a pathological narcissist, what is specifically codependent, and explain that if you don't meet that criteria, you're just selfish and entitled. You're not a pathological narcissist. And if you don't meet the criteria for being a codependent, it just means you're too selfless or giving. And so it was to encourage people to not use labels all the time. Well, it hasn't changed the world like I wanted it to be. So to the question, I think codependency and narcissism has been stable throughout modern history. It's just our understanding of it and our ability to point a finger to it. Now, because of the proliferation of information on narcissism, the world's been, talking about it. And so on one hand, that has been a blessing. But on the other hand, it's been a backlash because you go on YouTube or podcasts, everyone and their brother and sister has got something to say. Everyone is saying they're an expert. And there's just so much out there that people aren't getting the definitive explanation, which is probably why my human magnets in the book, and for those who can see this video, here's a cover of it. I mean, it's sold 200,000 copies and it's been published in 12 languages. I'm really lucky. I never thought that would happen, but it's probably why that book has done so well, because it's the book that therapists give their clients to say, here's the explanation. It's the book that people read who don't have a therapist to get it. So it's been stable over time. It's just our understanding and our sensitivity to it has made it seem like it's more prevalent, in my opinion.
How has the definition sort of refined and evolved over time since you've been on the landscape? So speaking of
Okay,
codependency.
well, everything that I do has evolved. I I'm like embarrassed to read my first edition. I was out there for 2 years, and actually, I just happen to have this. Here's a copy of the cover of this one. Don't buy it. But I was out there giving PowerPoint presentation to other therapists, and the company I was working for just acquired a publishing company, and they said, "Hey, why don't you just turn this into a book?" And I wasn't a writer, I wasn't a professional writer, and I put it together, um, and that book was like 160 pages, and the second edition 5 years later was 250 pages, and my third book was 350. Of course, it's 300 because we got the font all squished. But the point is, it's always evolving. And not only do I figure things out through myself, my number one test subject, but I am working with clients every day, well, Monday through Wednesdays. um, and I'm learning things in them. That's how things come to me. They come to me in a moment. And a lot of my clients, they'll know this, where I'll go, hold on a second, and I'll write a note down. I go, thank you. This is going to be a YouTube video. And they laugh, and they always feel good when they see the YouTube video because they feel some connection to it. So it's always evolving, because this is a very complicated topic. It's a landscape of information comprising so many different realms of study, whether it's like neurological, psychological, behavioral, environmental, thinking. And so I am growing, and I'll probably be evolving until I stop. And that'll be good because that's how science works. And maybe someone will see my work and take it to the next level. And that's exactly what I wanted, because that's how I know people are getting what they most need, is through the evolution and the growth of our understanding.
And what has surprised you about findings in SLDD over time? So the nuances that come up in the evidence and realizations about personal experience.
I wish, I'm not a psychologist. I have a master's degree and a license, but so I don't, and even if I was a psychologist, I'm not prone for research. So the evidence I have, and it's very strong, and I think profound evidence, is the evidence of my experience as a mental health practitioner of 37 years, my own recovery, as a recovering self-love deficient or codependent, and what I hear back from other therapists. No one is telling me I'm full of crap and I don't know what I'm talking about. And trust me, if you're talking about theory and diagnosis and you're making stuff up, other therapists are gonna push back. So please remind me of the question, because I went in a direction and I lost that question.
So what have been some of the surprises in subjective experience or
Got
in
it.
your work and
Thank you.
sort of the nuances? Yeah.
Got it. Thank you. um, um, is that I keep learning, that um, the evolution of understanding will probably never be complete, but should it? Because I'm as much a scientist as I'm an artist. In other words, I'm intuitive. I have this whole thing about art, which has nothing to do with this interview, but the intuition part is that I'm always keeping myself open for a new way of understanding things. And plus, my ideas change. And if there's enough evidence, and evidence for me is what I see out in the world, what I see with my clients, what I see, in the literature and books that I read, um, I shift, I move forward. And so I haven't had any big shifts. And, and I don't mean to sound grandiose here, but the human magnet syndrome, and I say this, it's a law, it's a fact. Anyone who's codependent will say the same thing to you 99% of the time about their attraction to narcissists. It is a fact that codependents um, fall in love with narcissists because of unconscious motivations connected to trauma happened as a child. it's easy to show, it's easy to explain. And if anything, I just add nuances to it. I add more material explanations. For example, in the book, The Codependency Revolution, I had for codependency personality types, 4 of them. At one time, when I first wrote the Human Magnet Syndrome, I didn't have the idea of personality types. And I remember thinking, and I was thinking of someone in my family who is selfish and who's a liar and a manipulator and as was a narcissist, but yet she married people with personality disorders. And I thought to myself, I got scared for a second. I thought, uh-oh, maybe my theory's wrong. Because how can she be a narcissist and he be a narcissist? And at that time, the idea of personality type came up. This woman happens to be a pathological liar, a manipulator, uh, but yet she is always engaged in relationships, especially marital relationships, in which her partner is a pathological narcissist. So she's not a narcissist. So that's when I came up with the idea of active codependent, and it changed everything. Active, passive. Passive is like my grandpa Chuck, the salt of the earth. And then I came up with the idea of anorexic, that people will say, after my horrible relationship with a narcissist, 5 years ago, I just stopped dating and I've been fine since. But they're not fine because what they did was they disassociated from the romantic part of their selves. That is a part of humanity, that they had to be outside of any potential for romance, love, or intimacy. And then there became other personality types. So that is an example of how it keeps growing and expanding as I learn more about it and try to help the world learn, which there's no coincidence. And the title of my book on the codependency revolution is fixing what has always been broken. The world needs an explanation for this problem, because without an explanation, you can't have the solution.
Last question. When you are helping people put a frame on the picture of this part of their life, or helping them come to some deeper realizations about this core shame, for instance, that they may be
Yes.
harboring. What are some of the feedback you're getting many years later, or even months later, when they're using your advice?
It's a great question. You remind me of how damn lucky and fortunate I am, how I'm living a dream, because I'm so used to, it's been years. It's been 12 years since I came up with this idea and created my first presentation to other therapists. From then to now, I get a lot of satisfaction because I was able to turn my own problems. By the way, I'm in therapy often, and I probably won't stop, because that is my understanding of the problem and the solution. But the fact that the world has this information, and I might not be as, and I quote this, popular or well viewed as I was back in my heyday, but I always get positive feedback from people that come across my work. They always say about the same thing, and that is, thank you. Up until I saw your video, up until heard your podcast, or I read your book, I had no idea what the problem was. And now I know I'm not crazy. Well, and then they'll joke. So I am blessed in that respect, that I get to keep impacting the world and eventually creating what will just be standard knowledge. I'm not there yet. I mean, but I'd like to be, where everyone knows across the board, well, codependency is just best explained by what's in the human magnet syndrome and the codependency cure. But I haven't retired yet, so there's still more time.
Thank you very much for the opportunity and your time today. Appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And thank you. Those are very good questions. And I hope that they help you, your readers, and the community at the Good Men Project.